brakes working.
Hey guys, today on the Fastlane car, we are taking the Jeep Renegade Trailhawk through some mud, through some goop, through some off-road terrain to see how it performs here at the FCA Proving Grounds in Chelsea, Michigan. Wow, look at that. They actually set up a nice little water crossing for us here. Not bad at all. So my dad's gonna jump in and join me, and let's hit the trail to see how this little guy does.
So we're in the Renegade, and this is a Trailhawk, so it is muddy, and we are just going to see how it does here out on their proving ground, so you guys can see what it's like to actually go down the course they use to test a lot of the vehicles that are worthy enough to wear that trail rated badge.
So something tells me that they're not going to put us in a trail that we're going to get stuck in.
You sure? I'm hoping we get stuck. Look at that hill.
I think that would be some pretty bad press, if I'm being totally honest. But I still think we're going to hit some pretty cool terrain. So the Renegade Trailhawk, do you feel the brake lock differentials working there?
I do.
The Renegade Trailhawk is what they market as, you know, their off-roady trim, right?
Right.
Of course, there's no Rubicon Trailhawk per se, or Renegade per se.
No.
The Trailhawk version of the Renegade and the Cherokee and the Grand Cherokee and the Compass are the off-road trims.
Yes.
But they're somewhat off-roady depending on the trim. So this is the Renegade, which means we get the terrain response, we get four-wheel drive low, and we get, you know, the four-wheel drive lock, we get a little bit of extra ground clearance, we get some more aggressive tires, we have the skid plates.
All right, Chad, so you're the chief engineer for this bad boy?
Yes, sir.
All right, the baby Jeep, right? The baby, the smallest of the Jeep brand. Let's talk about how you decide that it's trail rated. What does it have to be able to do to get that trail rating?
So we tested both here in the CPG in the Proving Grounds, as well as go out to Moab. And we go out to Moab and we head it through Fins and Things, as well as a few other trails out there, and try and hit some of the slick rock. We hit the sand out in Moab, as well as some of the kind of the shale that loose, to try and really put the paces through each one of the trail modes, the terrain modes that we have.
Yeah, and so obviously it doesn't have a low range transfer case, right? So when you lock it in low range, and I'm using air quotes, what you're getting is you're locking in first gear.
Right, correct.
So does that hurt the performance of the vehicle, or is the gearing low enough that you can still kind of crawl your way through most things?
So the gearing's low enough. We have a different FDR in the Trailhawk.
What's FDR?
So the final drive ratio is slightly different than the on-road. Yeah. And then on the Trailhawk, since we have a higher FDR, it does a better crawl ratio. So that gets us our 20-to-1. This is 21.5 to 1 with a slightly higher FDR than the Compass. And what that does is allow us to get through these obstacles with a really nice control and a slow movement.
I just had a conversation with some of the Jeep guys, and I said that a vehicle really without a low range transfer case doesn't score very highly in the TFL off-road index, right? Because that's worth 20 points. And terrain management is only worth 5 points. And this is a pretty good example of that. While it is trail rated, it does not have a low transfer case. And you may be wondering, why is it important to have a low range transfer case? And that is because even though this has, about 180 horsepower or so? Yeah. You take that power and torque and you multiply it, giving you a lot more grunt and a lot more go power when you have a low range transfer case. Plus, it also slows down kind of how slow the vehicle can go, so you can pick and choose your way through it.
So right now, all your torque is on the engine on the front drive, and then when you're in a four-lock, right, you're splitting your torque from front to rear, typically 50-50. But when your BLD kicks in, then it's going to the wheel, where you see you need it there instead of obviously the wheel that's in the air that's spinning. Right. So a brake breaks that wheel that's spinning, and you get all the torque to the one wheel to allow you to get through the event.
And how does the suspension differ from like a Trailhawk to a Sport?
So the tuning's slightly different, obviously because of the on-road feel versus the off-road feel. So you get a little bit more cushy feel, other than that on-road feel.
Are you adding any skid plates? Do you have any?
So there's skid plates, a lot of protection underneath, all throughout the underbody, as well as there's a slight inch lift to the Trailhawk versus the on-road to get that added ground clearance, which is what we need when we're out on these trails.
Now the Jeep Renegade Trailhawk has independent suspension. So it's not solid axle, so it's gonna probably lift a wheel or two here. But we do have the brake lock differential system on the Jeep. No manual locking differentials, but what that means is I have to stay in the throttle just a little bit and it will engage the system to power me through what I need to go. So if I just slowly creep into it, you can feel the left rear pick up pretty good there. And then if I just slowly apply some throttle, it should figure it out, which it does, and pulls us through. Now I will say that even though I don't have a proper locker in the Renegade like you would in a Cherokee Trailhawk, with just a little bit of throttle, it actually pulls it through pretty decently. You know, on the Cherokee Trailhawk you have a manual rear locker, and when you engage it in low range, it is a proper low range transfer case, and it does properly lock up the rear end.
Now you have two engine options, right? This one is a 1.3 liter
That's
turbo.
correct.
Which one's better for off-roading?
I'll leave that one up to you.
Okay, all right. They're your babies.
I like them both.
Okay.
I do. Each one has a different. It's like both. It's like your kids. You love them both a little bit differently, but each one has its own little flavor and its own little, I'll call it, expertise on the trail.
So this little Renegade has that new 1.3.
Yeah, turbo.
Yeah, and I think it's much, at least in this kind of stuff, much better than the 2.4
Tiger Shark.
Because that makes all of its power way up high. So you really gotta, and torque, you really gotta rev the beans off of it. Where this little turbo actually seems much happier to kind of spool up further down.
So are turbos the new way to go when it comes to off-roading? I mean, now the Wrangler has one, this has one.
Well, if you don't have a proper low-range transfer case like that Gladiator in front of us, having that turbo to add that little bit of extra torque is huge.
Now we were running through some water up to about the front of the grill. How much can this ford? You know that number?
19 inches.
19.
So we had 19 inches on water fording with all the Trailhawk models.
All right. It felt like we were deeper than that.
It's this is getting pretty deep with some of the bigger cars going through there. Bigger Jeeps go through as well as the power wagons. So as the end of the day, it might be a little bit bigger than 19 inches or a little bit deeper.
Okay, so that first time around through the mud, I was told to put it in rock mode, but I'm actually going to go ahead and switch it to mud mode to see if that makes a considerable difference out here in the deep stuff. What's great about the Renegade that a lot of you guys forget is that it's a lightweight vehicle. And you know, it's easy to forget that when you're off in your Power Wagon. But the Power Wagon's got 6,000-7,000 pounds of girth to pull through some of these trails. The Renegade is lightweight, it's small, it's maneuverable, and it doesn't get enough credit in the off-road world. And I know like a lot of the old school Cherokee guys look at the Renegade and they're like, whoa, it doesn't have solid axles. But even still, the modern tech in the Renegade will take you through stuff that you probably wouldn't believe. Now, I'm lifting up an axle pretty good there, lifting up a wheel. And even still, just a little bit of throttle pulls it right through. You just gotta trust the system, and it's not quite like driving with a locker where you just creep on through. With the brake lock differential system, you gotta be willing to hold the throttle consistently for just a little bit to get the system to catch up with your throttle input. And then once you get the wheel spinning, it can brake that wheel and send torque to the wheel that actually has traction. It's probably not as good off-road as a true locker, but in a pinch, like it really has a considerable amount of performance when you need it. Hey,
that was kind of cool to watch both the Renegade, the Wrangler, the Gladiator, and the Power Wagon go through that obstacle.
Yeah, that was really cool. What do you think of the little Renegade?
You know, I've got a soft spot in my heart for these little guys. They're kind of like the little Mighty Mites, remember those?
Yeah, right.
The little Jeep that could.
So the biggest issue with this Renegade, if I'm being honest, are these wild peaks. And they're okay, but they're not, you know, they're not a KO2, they're not a Firestone MT2 like you'd find on a proper old school off-roader.
And are you seeing customers who are actually taking these things to places where a lot of people take Wranglers to?
Absolutely. Yeah. Out in Moab, I was just out there for Easter Jeep Safari, and out there with Mark Allen, the head of design, and a lot of the Renegades and the Compass customers are personalizing these cars a lot like a Wrangler. So it's this Jeep family, this outdoor, this I can go anywhere attitude with these Trailhawks.
When you say personalized, you mean lift?
lift. They you see a lot of the racks on top of the roof.
Yeah.
You know, so they do their own little thing to
Rooftop
make
tents.
it them.
Yeah.
Right? Makes it yours.
Yeah, that's actually remarkable. I think what's remarkable about it is not only if you can go off-road, but that actually there's more space on the inside than on the outside, right? It's a very small vehicle when you look at it, but when you're inside of it, you feel like you're in a much bigger Jeep.
Yeah.
I think it might have as much room as a Wrangler, actually.
It's a pretty nice car. It's a surprising car. I think a lot of people get into the car.
Yeah.
And then what they do is they get in the car and like, oh, I'm not sure if I can go over that or go through that. And it does it very well with lots of control.
I will say from an off-road perspective, these little guys have no articulation.
Yeah, and you know, this really does compete with like a Subaru Crosstrek XB, right? That's where this is probably... I think the brakes working.
Yeah, it's not as seamless as maybe a locking differential, you know?
Yeah. But like I was saying, this competes with like a Crosstrek XB.
Yeah.
And you know, you guys can put this on the TFL or yourself, right? Our new off-road index. And you'll see that this does a little better than the Subaru. And that's because while they both don't have a low-range transfer case, and they both do have tray management, this actually has skid plating and recovery hooks.
Yeah, it does. I mean, the issue though is people see the word Trailhawk on the side, and they think they can go take it, you know, up
Hell's
to Mount
Revenge.
Everest. Yeah, it's not. It might do Hell's Revenge once, but the issue with the Renegade and to some extent the Compass and maybe even the Cherokee as well is that yes, they're pretty good off-road, but it's not as stress-free as like a Wrangler. You know that you have smaller axles, right? You know that it's just not as sturdy underneath as a Wrangler. Because yes, it's built for this kind of terrain, but it's not, you know, rated to go down the Rubicon every day, all the day.
Yeah, and that's the problem with off-roading. It's not like off-roading starts at like dirt road and then all of a sudden gently and cautiously maneuvers its way up to, you know, a cliff. I mean, you're off-roading on a dirt road, and the next thing you know, you're in the deep right away.
Oh, for sure.
And that's when it doesn't work, right?
You do have the terrain response mode.
Yeah.
And I know that, you know, it's pretty good at distributing power, but my issue is terrain response is never a replacement for ground clearance or skid plates or solid axles or lockers, right?
Right.
And a lot of the manufacturers use it as a way, in a relatively affordable way, to, you know, make a vehicle or market a vehicle as more off-road worthy. But at the end of the day, just like there's no replacement for displacement, there's no replacement for clearance or for you know, the hardcore off-road tech.
Yeah, and the other side of this argument, of course, is that 99.9% of these guys will never go into anything like this.
Yeah.
And so why would you want all the weight and complexity and cost of having all that stuff for something that's going to be, you know, a cool kid getter? And that's the lack of ground clearance right there. Yeah.
Well, especially like a vehicle like the Renegade or the Compass.
Yeah.
I mean, in Colorado, we see them with bikes on them, you know, up trailheads, but you never see them like off-road for fun,
Very
right?
few. I mean, yeah. I mean, this is going to be an inclement weather, maybe dirt road Jeep. I don't think a lot of people are even going to do what we're doing with it today.
So I've been following the off-road community with the Renegade a lot, and there's some pretty crazy stuff that's going out there in terms of, you know, lift kits and people running big tires. What do you think of like your baby being changed, being modified?
I love
all
Jeeps being personalized. Gotcha. It's a great thing to be able to personalize those cars and make them your own. You know, it's a great foundation to start from, and I love that people take it to heart and make it their own. That's a great thing about these vehicles. Right. Everywhere from this one all the way up to the new Gladiator. And when you have got your terrain management, you know, your dial where you can change the off-road setting, what's the primary difference between auto, rock, sand? What are you changing? So each calibration for each one of those modes is slightly different and tuned and calibrated for that mode. So when we're out in Moab, on the slick rock, whether we're here in the mud or even on the snow, we do a lot of the low mu testing to be able to understand how that's calibrated for that mode, to make sure that when the customer selects that mode, the car is handling exactly the way he's expecting it to with the label on that mode. Okay, so I've got this little section. I'm going to try to left foot brake it. I'm not super sure we're supposed to be left foot braking it, but you know, why not? I'm going to go ahead and give it a shot. Oh yeah. Actually, the left foot braking is pretty good. I wasn't sure how it would be because, you know, we don't have a proper low range transfer case.
Okay, now that's where the brake lock comes in. Okay, now the guy told me to try to teeter it. I'm gonna try to do that here. It's a little bit tricky, because if I had a locker, it'd be super easy. Oh yeah, that's brilliant. Actually, the left foot braking actually works pretty well in the Renegade, and the brake lock differential system is still allowing me to have a little bit of fun here. So is it a Wrangler?
No.
It's not a Wrangler, but it's still fun actually.
Yeah,
you know, it's better than people give it credit for.
People call it an Italian Jeep, Tommy, and while it is Italian, you know, I think first and foremost, it's still a Jeep. This is Roman.
And Tommy.
Saying thanks for watching, and check out tflcar.com for more news, views,
and real world reviews.